Thank you for joining us today for another webinar and interview. Today, I have some very amazing guests that I'd like to introduce to you. On my right, I have Dale Murphy, who played Major League Baseball for over 20 years and was the youngest player in history to win back-to-back MVP awards. Seven-time All-Star, five-time Gold Glove winner. Dale's baseball awards and accolades make him one of the most dominant players of the decades of the 80s. His number 3 was retired by the Atlanta Braves, and he is a member of the Atlanta Braves Hall of Fame. Still considered one of the true gentlemen of the game, Dale is now a highly sought-after motivational leadership speaker and owns a restaurant in Atlanta called Murph's, and he is the father of 8 and grandfather of 13. Dale, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
And to my left, his right, we have Dale's wife of 40 years, Nancy Murphy. Nancy spent the past 40 years primarily as a mother. Their 8 children and 13 grandchildren are the joy of her life. She's been a central part of Dale's career, both during baseball and after retirement, and fills the role of executive assistant for the Dale Murphy LLC. Now that their children are grown and gone, Nancy has created her own company, Nancy Murphy Coaching, which focuses on helping people progress through times of adversity and change. Nancy is a Clifton certified strength coach. Nancy, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So to get started, obviously Dale with your baseball career and Nancy with being a strengths coach, I would love to hear from both of you on how you see coaching. Like, what is the value of a coach to you? So Dale, in your professional career being coached, and then Nancy, you being a coach.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I was, a typical young kid, loved to play baseball. And so now with the perspective of after being retired and going through my career, the first thing that I noticed was I needed a coach at every level, especially as a young player when you're acquiring skills, trying to learn the basics of the game. And you're not really thinking too far ahead. You're just trying to, have a good game that day, at least what you think is a good game. And then what I noticed as competition got better, I needed that coach even more. It was my experience in Little League and high school. I was drafted after high school by the Atlanta Braves in 1974. So that's when I went into professional baseball. But as I look back at my Little League years and my high school years, I'm not saying I got a hit every time, but I was very successful. The competition wasn't that tough. And then when I signed a professional contract, all of a sudden, I learned that I not only needed the fundamentals that I was taught as a youngster, but I was going to have to do things better and more consistently and day in and day out, because I was facing players that were better than me, as good as me, that were all-stars wherever they came from, and the competition got tougher and tougher. So it was apparent to me that I was going to need somebody with good experience that was not only a good coach, but I think another phrase that goes hand in hand with coaching is teacher. You can have a lot of the baseball teams now use a lot of analytics, a lot of video to analyze swings, a lot of computer analysis of a player's performance. But no matter what, you need someone who can communicate the skills that you need all the time. And so my coaches, I was very lucky at a young age to have good coaches, and then throughout my career, the coaches that I had, whether I was a rookie or a 10-year veteran or was just getting ready to finish my 20th year in the game, I always needed a coach there by my side to help me and remind me of even those things that I learned at a young age. Getting to know the basics, the fundamentals, and not only knowing and understanding them, but practicing them every day, and that it was just a routine day in and day out. And the coaches were always there to remind me how to do that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And for those of us that loved watching you play when we were growing up, how different do you think your career would have turned out if you didn't have that level of coaching?
Well, I don't think I would have made it because there are so many. There are a lot of different styles in coaching, but every once in a while, I would get together with a coach that I really clicked with, that really understood me, and that was really able to communicate things to me and show me a different way to do things. There are certainly some basic fundamentals you have to do to be a good hitter, but there are as many different ways to communicate those fundamentals as there are personalities.
Right.
And the one I remember, I had a bunch of great ones, but Joe Torre was a manager and a coach for me that really communicated too well. We really thought on the same level about a lot of things. And my career just blossomed under his direction. There's no question about it that without him and a number of other coaches, that I don't think I would have lasted very long.
Okay. I really appreciate that. I like that you're willing to give them the nod, right, for the help that they had in your career, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. You just can't see things on your own. You need another set of eyes, right, to communicate some improvements you need to make, or just to remind you of certain things. And my coaches throughout my career were invaluable.
Okay. I love that. Thank you. And before we get to your wife, this is just a shameless plug for you about your 1983 season, where the only player besides Willie Mays that hit 300 with a 30-30 campaign. Your average was 302, 36 home runs, 30 steals. So that was awesome.
Well,
Nancy, the same question for you. Absolutely. Where do you see the value in a coach?
I think that first off, let me say, I think we all need a coach. In whatever part of our life we are now facing, we all need a coach. And it isn't that we aren't able to handle life on our own, not at all. It's that we need the support. We need so many things that a coach has to offer. I think coaches can help you in so many ways, but coaches are trained to see things that we can't always see. Like when Dale was talking about things that maybe a coach of his could see, maybe something he was doing different with his swing, or something that he could not see in himself, but someone else could. And, coaches are trained to see patterns. They're trained to see what road you're on, what's ahead on the road that you are now on, and to help you discover for yourself if that is the road you are wanting to be on, or if you need to make some adjustments. I think coaches can help you reframe things in life. They can help you gain greater perspective. I am a Gallup certified strengths coach. And so what I do is I help people find their strengths. I help them find the things, the place where they feel the most authentic in life is when they are using their strengths. And when you can identify your strengths and your gifts, they can help you through challenging times in a way with some kinds of ideas and ways to do it that you might not have thought of yourself. I think coaches can help you identify things that are within your control and things that are not within your control. And when you can identify things in your life that are in your control, then you are able to make changes or figure out how to deal with those things to get through a hard time. All of these things all together all contribute and all in all help you to, I think, find a positive space in your life where you can look at whatever it is you're facing and realize that it's temporary. That's another thing that some of Dale's great coaches did, is helped him realize if he was in a slump or having, a bad day at the plate, it didn't mean he would never get another hit, even though sometimes as humans, right, that's where we want to let our minds go, is we can never do this again. We're going to fail forever and ever and ever, and that's just not true. Everything is temporary and we will get through it. But having a coach there to help you step by step is so invaluable that I don't even think we all recognize. how much we need a coach.
Exactly.
I'm just going to add to that as far as having a coach see things differently and maybe bringing out of you strengths that you didn't know you had. The perfect example for me was being under Joe Torre's leadership. He taught me, and I won't go into the details of it too much, but I was pretty much of a pull hitter. If I was a right-handed hitter, I hit everything to left field. But he taught me and opened up my eyes as far as being able to hit the ball all over the field. And what happened as a result of that, I started trying it, and my average went up, my home runs went up, and this is something I discovered with Joe Torre. He said, Dale, this is the kind of hitter you should be. And one other example, you mentioned my 1983 season where I hit 30 home runs and stole 30 bases. I wasn't even thinking of myself as a base stealer until Joe Torre came along, and he convinced me that I was fast enough to steal more bases and be a more complete player. And definitely with his coaching and his confidence in me and showing me that I had strengths that I didn't know I had, I became a better hitter. And I had a very unique season one year where I actually stole 30 bases and hit 30 home runs, which doesn't happen very often. And I never thought I'd be able to do that till he convinced me and showed me that I actually had a strength, that I was fast enough to do that. And so the coaches
I love that.
things that you can do that you didn't realize you could do.
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking, you were 9 years into your career.
Right.
And you were already talented, obviously. You were playing professional baseball, so he saw more strengths, more talents in you, and then helped you develop them, which I think is amazing. And having you on right now, for the people watching, I think when it comes to coaching, we instantly think sports, right? That's what we're conditioned to know. And, why do we have coaches? Well, they teach, they train, they help develop these kids. When you're older and now you're a professional player, the coach is still there to keep the team together and hold you accountable. But I don't think people realize that we can have that kind of coaching across the board in our lives, to what Nancy was saying. I mean, imagine the game changer at work. If you have an executive coach that's holding you accountable, that's helping you draw some strengths out of things that you didn't know you could do in terms of leadership or whatever it might be, or maybe even at home. Nancy, I know that, raising all those kids, you and I were talking the other day, and when they leave the house, there's a transition that takes place that can be hard, difficult, may even put you in a slump. And that coaching can help you through that. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I started realizing when my kids left home that they grew up, they left home, which we all want them to do, right? And so we were, always, of course, happy that they've all, they're married with families and, jobs and created their own lives. And, but when they did that, it was such a difficult transition time for me. It was difficult for Dale, but in a different way. I think as a mother, when I have devoted really my entire life, my blood, sweat, and tears, my every waking moment to my children. And it was so much part of my identity that then when they left home, I realized I knew I had more to give the world. I knew I did. And I could not put my finger on it because I could not find my identity again. And so what coaching has done for me, when I became acquainted with Gallup Strengths Coaching, I started to realize that I had, first of all, that I had strengths that I didn't even know I had. And that those could be used to help other people find their strengths. Because in times of transition or challenge, when we need to move from one phase of life to the next, sometimes our identity is so wrapped up in our previous life that it's difficult for us to see ourselves fitting into something else. Right. And so that's what a coach can do. Is, as a matter of fact, I was going to say that when I did my certification and I attended the courses that I needed, I started realizing I want to coach. As a coach, I want to coach because it's so essential to all of us being able to really reach our potential. The other thing about having a coach I wanted to mention, as long as we're talking about Dale's 30-30 season, one reason he was able to do that year is that Joe believed in him as a coach, as he just was talking about, but also he empowered him. He said, you don't need a steal sign anymore. You don't even look to me for a steal sign. I trust you. And when you're out there on first base, if you think you can steal, you automatically have the steal sign. Now, I don't mean in order to empower someone, you have to say, hey, you can do whatever you want. I mean, they help you see, coaches can help you see your strengths and empower you to use your strengths and to be able to progress in a way that you might not have known you could. So anyway, when I became familiar with Gallup strength coaching, I knew this was my thing, because all of us, no matter if we're women whose children have just left home, or we're changing jobs, or we're in an unusual situation like we are right now in the world, and the future seems a little uncertain. No matter what our situation is, having a coach will help us through those bumpy times until we are through them and sailing in our new situation. It just
Absolutely.
is it's a transitional thing that I think we just can't overstate really how valuable coaching could be. And that's what I've come to realize through my own experience.
Awesome. Nancy, I couldn't have asked you to lead into our next question any better, really. With everything that's going on around us, COVID-19 hit, 10 million people lost their jobs last week. It looks here in the US, it looks like another 10 million more this week, right? Very trying times as people try to put their lives back together and figure out what are they going to do going forward. And who can they rely on or lean on to help get them through that. And so we're going to talk about some of the initiatives that SOAR is involved in. But prior to that, Dale, I would love to ask you the power of coaching in times of adversity. If you can think of a time in your career where you were struggling or were having some hard times where coaching was able to help elevate you and get you through it, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, well, what I noticed that as I progressed through my career in baseball, as I mentioned earlier, that the competition got better and better. So when the competition gets better and better, that means you're going to have more times when you're not doing well. And in baseball and in life, we call it a slump, where sometimes you come to the ballpark and you're in your slump. You haven't got a hit in 3 days. And, you almost play every day in baseball. So that's not very good. That's 0 for 12. Your confidence is low. You wonder what's going to happen at the ballpark that day. And that's when a coach can help you, not only with the physical things you may be doing wrong, but more importantly, with your mindset. Where's your head today, Murph? What are you thinking while you're up there? And a coach will be there to remind you first that it's temporary. I know in my heart that I did it last month or that I did last week, that I did it well, but now all of a sudden I've hit a roadblock.
Right.
And sometimes we're not that good at self-talk. It's important to improve upon that. But a coach is there to feed your mind and your spirit with confidence. And the first thing is not to panic and understand that it's temporary.
Right.
If it wasn't temporary, I wouldn't still be playing baseball. I would have been gone a long time ago.
Because it's not a question of skill set. We know you have the skill. It's mindset.
Right. Exactly. And your mindset affects your skill level.
Right.
So a good coach is not only a good teacher on the physical aspects, but he's also someone that can relate to you on the most important element of being a professional athlete, a successful professional athlete, is your mindset. Because everybody's good. What separates those is if everybody's good, what's going to separate you from the other guys? What's going to help you through the challenging times, which eventually are going to happen?
Right.
And it's your mindset. And if no one's there to remind you of those things day in and day out to improve your mindset, realize that you don't need to panic. There are so many people in so many challenging ways, and I hesitate a little bit to compare it to a slump in baseball, but that's what I felt like my career was over one specific time when I was a catcher, I wasn't doing very well, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to stay being a catcher. Eventually I moved to first base and to the outfield, and I had some coaches get me through a time when I actually thought my career was over. They were invaluable to help me learn a new position, to see things differently, and to progress during the most challenging parts of my career. And I think every player that made it to the big leagues usually has at least one moment of a lot of self-doubt, whether they're going to make it. And when you get through that moment of self-doubt, which you can't get through on your own, you need some help. It propels you for the rest of your career. Doesn't mean you're not going to have another slump, but the confidence that you can get as a result of being with good coaches, getting you through those challenging times, really is a foundational thing in your career. You know, we are going to get through this. You are going to get through this, and things are going to get better. Don't forget it. And we need coaches, mentors, to be there and help us through those challenging times. And I think the first thing is that my good coaches never panicked when I panicked. They were there to help me see things steadily and thoughtfully, and look to the future instead of just at the present moment where I'm in the biggest challenge.
Right. I think you articulated it really well, Dale. And outside of professional sports, I think in any career and in life, at some point, we all doubt ourselves. We all doubt our success. And we need a push to help propel us forward. And you were able to get that through your coaches. And a lot of people right now in trying times are looking around going, where is that help? Who is that help? Something that SOAR is doing right now is we're partnering with ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation. And we're going to be offering pro bono coaching to hundreds of thousands of people. And the purpose behind that is we see that need, right? That right now there's some challenging time. There's a lot of doubt, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of confusion as to what the future might hold. And what that can do to us is it can get us stuck mentally, right? We're not our best self. We're not out selling ourselves. We're not out looking for the best opportunity because we're in that slump, and we start to wonder, what do we have to offer? You know, why was I let go from my job? Amidst other things, there's a lot going on. There are a lot of HR professionals right now that are letting people go. And how is that affecting them? Right? Not just the people being let go, but the poor individual that has to be doing it. You know, it's a hard time for a lot of people involved.
Sure.
And so part of our initiative is to make sure that we get coaching in front of those people to help get through some of these mental barriers. And because when you're in a slump, I'm assuming you weren't very happy, right? And that can affect everything. It can affect your personal life, your professional life, you know, your self-worth. We tie it to a lot of things. One of those things being our career, our identity. And when that's tampered with, it can affect how happy we are.
Absolutely.
Another initiative I would like to mention is that ties into what we're doing, not only with ICF, but other organizations, is that as we're trying to scale and help as many people as we can. We're working with a group called Charity, which is a crowdfunding campaign. They've been able to raise over $1 billion for companies since their inception. And we're now partnering with them as we go out because we need funds to scale. We're not used to helping hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people at once. And so during this, as people are watching, we're going to put the link for Charity up. And if it's at all possible to help and to donate, because as you've been listening to Nancy and to Dale, and if you're a coach or you've been coached in your life, you understand the importance. And we want to be able to scale because there are a lot of people right now that need that help. And also outside of working with Charity, SOAR also has a WeFunder campaign. WeFunder is also a crowdsourcing campaign, which it's the same thing. It's gonna take some funds to be able to scale to help the people in crisis right now. And we're hoping that anybody that's watching this that has the means, that is wondering, how do I help? right? Because I think that's one of the situations we get in. If you want to talk about a slump or a mental block, we look around to our neighbors, we look around to the world, and we see the turmoil, but we don't necessarily know how to help. And so by contributing to one of SOAR's crowdfunding campaigns, you can know that that money is going towards helping your neighbors, specifically the people in crisis right now. So that would be fantastic if you could do it. Nancy, while I have you, I would love to ask you, and Dale as well, but why is it important, as a Gallup certified strength coach, why is it important that people understand what their strengths, what their talents are?
Well, I think that's such a good question, because it's something a lot of us don't really think about a lot. And sometimes we don't understand, for example, businesses, people that are most engaged at work are more likely to be productive. And people are more engaged if they are operating in their strengths, if they're doing, if their job involves some type of their particular strength. There are businesses and companies now who work with strengths coaches to do this very thing, to help people identify their strengths, because then they become more productive as a company. They understand this person's strength is this person's strength is this. But personally, when we understand what our strengths are, I think, and as I was listening to you and Dale talk about self-doubt and Dale's experiences in his career with self-doubt, I wanted to just comment on that as it has to do with strengths coaching, because there's self-doubt that we all experience when we think, well, I don't know if I'm good at this, or I don't know if I'm good at that. But there's devastating self-doubt that is what a lot of people are feeling right now. And all of us probably have felt sometime in our life. And it is the kind of self-doubt that it brings fear. And when we are afraid, fear is I think the root of so many other emotions that come out of us in other ways because we're afraid. And so what strengths coaching can do, and understanding your strengths, number one, you develop your potential in a more streamlined way, but also when you understand your strengths, now this is a systematic, scientific way of finding your strengths. And when you look at your results, for example, with Clifton Strengths Coaching, when you look at your results and see these are my top strengths, it is so empowering. And the fear of not knowing what you're good at, not knowing where to go next, not really knowing how do I get through this phase when my kids are all grown and I'm no longer mothering every single day. What do I do next? It induces fear. But if I know what my strengths are, then I can move forward with confidence instead of fear. And I think that's what it does when we understand really who we are and we live in our strengths, which means we are living most authentically in our life because we know our strengths.
I love that. Absolutely. Fear is paralyzing, number one, to your point. But I think second, if we're in a role or a capacity that we are not good at, and we experience failures because of it, that can affect us holistically, right? And it creates a pattern. You know those friends or those people that tend to succeed at everything they do. If they try something new, it's going to work out for them 100%. And everything they go into confidently. Well, those are the people that generally are doing things that they know they're good at, right? These are their competencies. Exactly. And the people that unfortunately in our lives we've seen fail over and over tend to continue to fail. But I think it's because they're missing that key piece. They don't understand what their talents or strengths are. And if you do, then it creates this sense of confidence. And when you look at Dale, one of the things you said is you weren't having success as a catcher. Well, and then they move you to first base. Unfortunately, a lot of times, not in the sporting world, in the professional world, if we're not good at our capacity, we're not given a second chance.
Right.
You're at work and you're not doing well, you're not producing, they may just let you go. When the reality is, it's just because you were in a role that did not fit you properly, that didn't cater to your strengths. And had you been, you could have been
Yes.
employee of the month,
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
totally different. And, here you are, 2-time MVP, saying you were in a position at one point that was not benefiting you or the team. Crazy to think, right?
Absolutely.
But you had great coaches. You had teams that stood behind you. And not all of us have that. And where I think that's where the coach comes in, right, Nancy? Is
Exactly.
not all of us have it, but all of us need it.
Exactly.
Right,
And it's
right.
difficult for us to even know what role we should be in. Maybe we're in the wrong role, but we don't know it because we have never had anyone help us discover what our strengths are. And once we discover our strengths, it was an epiphany for me when I realized these are showing up as my strengths, and these are my strengths. But sometimes I think we maybe it's humility. I don't know. We're afraid to look inside and say, I'm really good at this. But
Right.
that is what we need to do. Once we recognize our strengths, we will live a completely different life than if we are in roles where we don't excel.
Well, and I think part of it, to speak to your point, is society itself. We've been conditioned to self-assess, and instead of focusing on what we're good at, society says, well, what are you bad at? You need to fix that.
Yeah.
Take all of your energy and put it into becoming better because you're awful at these things.
Yep.
Right.
What a waste of time and energy.
Yeah.
If I know what I'm good at, and I can put
Yeah.
that same time and energy into those things and develop my talents and develop my strengths, Don Clifton said that's when, your potential explodes.
Yeah.
Once you identify and isolate what you're good at, and those are the things you focus on, then that's where the confidence is going to come in. Because if all I'm doing is focusing on what my weaknesses are,
Exactly.
where does the confidence come in?
And think about from the time we're in elementary school, our papers we turn in, they come back to us marked with the things we did wrong.
Right.
And so, when we are constantly focused on what we did wrong, this is interesting, and all Clifton Strengths coaches will have had this experience. But when you coach someone and they've taken the assessment and you put their 34 strengths in front of them, we like to call the lower ones their lesser strengths. It doesn't mean they're weaknesses necessarily, but they're their lesser strengths. Immediately, people go to their lower ones. They want to see what their lower ones are instead of looking at their top ones. And so you're right, we are conditioned to kind of, let's fix the things that are wrong. And that is so unproductive.
And Nancy, to your point, I wouldn't even call the bottom of my 34 my weaknesses. Like, they're not even a part of me. They're just gaping voids or holes in my life.
Yeah.
But if our children come home with a report card, if there's 5 A's and 1 F, what is our inclination to do when they hand us the report card?
Yeah.
Do we celebrate their 5 A's, or do we immediately freak out and wonder why they just failed one of their classes?
Exactly.
And
the other thing, since we're on the parenting subject, parents, I think too, we're, because of fear, if we're parenting from a place of fear, which is hard not to do sometimes.
Right.
If we're parenting from a place of fear, we're constantly thinking about what our kids might do wrong. Or when they're teenagers, or being afraid of what they might do wrong, instead of parenting from a place of strength and focusing on their strengths and what they could do right. And, as parents, you kind of go in and out of those phases of your parenting style and parenting skills. But I do think it's interesting to realize how much more valuable it is for us to recognize our own strengths and the strengths of those around us.
Absolutely.
I was just going to interject here. I think professional sports teams, in college and high school, it's, you don't have the level of talent that you have in the professional sports. But I think this is one place where professional sports is pretty quick to say, okay, this person isn't a pitcher. Let's see where else he can go. And this is, again, as you referred to my situation, I wasn't a very good catcher. Maybe he's a first baseman. Didn't work out there. Murph, maybe you're an outfielder. Someone stuck with me and allowed me to develop some strengths I didn't know I had. But they if you're doing something well in sports, they try to help you find your strengths a little bit more, I think, than in the business community sometime. And in our culture, we, as both of you have mentioned, we concentrate on weaknesses and trying to improve them. I had weaknesses as a hitter, and my coaches always told me, okay, Murph, you're not a very good low ball hitter. You're a better high ball hitter. Lay off the low ball. Don't swing at that one anymore.
Don't even try.
Yeah, because it's your weakness. But when the pitcher throws one up here in your zone, you got to be ready to go. That's your strength. So don't sit there as you're trying to hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball and think about your weakness. That's just is not going to be productive. And that's a great lesson I think our culture, society, and businesses can learn. You need a coach, you need a team to help everybody develop their strength.
Absolutely.
The other thing, Dale, about your about them, moving you to first base and then the outfield, they could see his strength that he could hit.
Right.
And so when they knew he could hit, then they wanted to help him develop his hitting, which ironically, he started to develop more once he realized he wasn't going to be a catcher using his arm like that. And so, I think that's a really key part of that, that they moved you to find your area of strength while recognizing that you had a strength to hit.
Yes, I had a strength in there somewhere.
But to recognize it is the key, and have someone empower you.
Absolutely, and to not give up.
Right.
One of my favorite TED Talks is called "Good Leaders Make You Feel Safe," which the idea behind the talk is that if they've already shown faith in you, right? They've brought you on to the team, they've brought you into the business, and so if you're not having success, don't just blame the individual and shut them out. Help them grow and develop into a success. Or if we brought them onto this business and we saw them as a talent and they're not being productive, they're not succeeding, the onus is on us to figure out what are we doing wrong? How are we not supporting this individual enough? Or where can we move them? What can we do to make sure that we all reach our goals, which I think is a phenomenal mindset, a great way to approach business, life, family, sports. Right?
Sure.
We don't give up on the people that are part of our team.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And we're with them through thick and thin. So that is awesome. We're running out of time, but I did want to ask one more question in terms of coaching, Dale, specifically professional sports. When you're in little league, you don't know much. I mean, you know a little, but your coach is there to train you and move you up. You get to your teenage years, and every teenager knows everything, I know, but you realize that there's still people better than you. But then you get to the major leagues, and now you're a Golden Glove winner. Now you're an MVP. If we took coaching away and we just let these professionals who are amazing at what they do, I'm not going to say run amok, because I think they're more professional than that. But if we took away coaching at that level, how would things change? And the reason I'm asking is I think there's a lot of people in business, whatever that type of business may be, that think, well, I don't need coaching. I've been doing this for 30 years.
Sure.
Right. I think, Steve down the hall here, he's new. He's a rookie to the company.
Yeah.
And so he could use coaching, but I've been in sales for 40 years, or I've been in biotech for the last 30 years. I don't need a coach. And so that's kind of where I'm getting at with this question is, why is it important that even at that level, at the highest level of productivity, that you still have a coach?
That's a great question. Because the first thing that came to my mind is you never stop learning. Because you think from your experience that you have seen it all, that you know it all, and that you're doing everything you can do. It's just not the case, because we're human. We forget things. We go into slumps. We need a coach there to remind us of that. I think your question of what would happen if in Major League Baseball, for instance, if they got rid of their coaches, what would be the result? It would be shorter careers, not as good performance, you'd still see a certain level of good performance because they're professionals, but you wouldn't see players reaching their potential. And clubs recognize this because there are more coaches now on teams than there were when I played.
Yes.
So now they're not decreasing the coaches, and believe me, in the business world, if you can cut a salary and cut a job from somewhere and add it to the bottom line of your corporation, they would do that. Well, are they doing that with coaches? No, they're still trying to find the best, and they're increasing the coaching staff because they know even in today's game, things are different.
Yep.
There are more what I would call specifically mindset coaches in baseball. Whereas I played in a time where it was a kind of a combination. My coaches were hitting coaches and sometimes psychologists. Now they actually have psychologists helping these players. So the coaching staff is increasing. I think that is the answer to your question, is that is an invaluable part of the investment of the baseball team, is the best coaches you can get for your team. Otherwise, you just don't see players reach their potential or their longevity.
I agree 1,000%, if that's even possible. People generally don't see it, though. That's the problem.
Exactly.
There is a very large nonprofit organization that you are familiar with who sends out tens of thousands of participants every year to different countries around the world. And these individuals need to learn the local language in order to communicate with the people that they are out serving. And what they've found is that in the first 6 months, right? So these people generally go out for about 2 years. And in the first 6 months, their language proficiency skyrocketed on a trajectory like this, right? Because every day they were learning. It was new to them. They were trying to communicate. And what they found, though, is that at the 2-year mark, that their language proficiency was less than it was at the 6-month mark. And these people what happens is they get comfortable. And the same thing happens with any new job.
Absolutely.
Or any job that you have, period. I mean, when it's new, you're a voracious reader, or, you're trying to learn everything you can about the company, its culture, its history. How am I going to succeed in this position? And then you get to a point where you find this level of comfort where you're succeeding. And you're like, okay, I'm here. And you basically just try to hold the status quo for the rest of, your time.
Yeah.
But what happens is there's really no such thing as stagnancy when it comes to development. You're either progressing or you're digressing. And I agree with you 100% that these players would never reach their full potential. But I think that applies to all of us in every aspect of our lives, is we get comfortable. And so if we don't have somebody that's holding us accountable, that's helping us point out what we could do better and setting goals with us and moving us towards those goals like a coach does, that we will never reach our potential.
Yeah.
And I believe that with my whole heart. So
absolutely.
I couldn't have asked you to articulate it any better. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dale and Nancy, we're at the end of our time, but thank you both so much for joining me today. You have shared with us some personal insight, some stories, and some truth that I think we can really all relate to on why it's important that we have a coach, why coaches even exist, but how we can use them to help in our personal, professional lives reach our potential, but also how we can lean on them in times of distress, uncomfort, and overall crisis like we're experiencing today in the world. And so thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You two take care of yourselves.
You too.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.